Hi, my name's Jacob Armstrong. I'm the pastor of Providence United Methodist Church, and today I want to talk to you about the miracle of Easter. And to do that, I want to tell you about Mary, Petey, and Jesus. The first Mary I want to tell you about was my grandmother. I never met her, I only saw her in photographs, but I heard all these great things about her my whole life, about her faith, about her character, but she died before I was born. For whatever reason, though, I told myself if I ever have a daughter, I will name her Mary after this Mary. And when Rachel and I had our first daughter in 2004, I asked Rachel if we could name her Mary, and she said, "I love it." When Mary was born, I was a full-time student and a pastor. I was attending graduate school over an hour drive from our house, so I had about 2 hours on the road, all day in class, and I worked at the church too. And I had little Mary. And so even though this was big time against the rules, while it was still dark, before I left for school in the morning, I would sneak into Mary's room and I would whisper to this tiny baby, "Mary." And then louder, I'd say, "Mary." And she would open up her eyes and I would snatch her up and simply just rock her back to sleep, saying her name, my grandmother's name, her name, Mary. And she'd close her eyes, I'd put her in the crib and go to school. I did that because I wanted her to know me. I wanted her to know her name, but I wanted her to know the way her name sounded coming from my voice, because I didn't want to just be someone in a photograph to her. When Mary was about 2, she found a worm in the backyard, and like a lot of little kids, Mary gave everything names, and she named her worm Petey. Except when I saw it, Petey wasn't a worm, Petey was a caterpillar. So still working on the Dad of the Year award and only my second year of eligibility, I got a pickle jar, put Petey along with a twig and some grass in the jar, and punched a couple holes in the top. The perfect recipe for death. We set Petey on the end table in our living room and we watched him. It was fascinating, at least for a few days. For a few days, we watched Petey move around, and then he began to slow down and, yeah, you guessed it, eventually connected himself to the top of the lid of the jar and built his cocoon. For a few more days, Mary and I would return to the jar and I would explain to her about the intricacies of metamorphosis. And then she stopped watching altogether. There wasn't much to see. After a week, the grass in the jar kind of began to wither. At 2 weeks, I moved the jar from the end table to a shelf up above our TV. You know, you do these things as parents you don't totally think through. And I thought, why did I put the caterpillar in a jar? Why did we name it? Why is it up on a shelf now? We're on day 16. Why not in the trash can? You know, you want to teach the little girl something? Tell her sometimes you get a caterpillar and it doesn't go the way you planned. But no, instead, I set that thing up on a shelf above the TV where she doesn't notice it anymore. But every time I sit down to watch TV, I have to see it. Was there something in me hoping? I don't think so. I just didn't have the heart to throw it out. That's where Easter starts. Not a bright sunny morning with the buds emerging on tree branches, not in pretty clothes opening up baskets of colored eggs. Easter starts in the dark. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, is how the scriptures tell us Easter starts. It starts with, what was I thinking? How did I get myself into this? Why did I get so attached? Why did I believe? And it starts with Mary. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene, went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the entrance. Mary Magdalene was one of Jesus' friends, one of Jesus' followers, one of Jesus' disciples. Mary is not a bit player in the Jesus story, and she's the Mary I want to tell you about today. She's mentioned 12 times in the 4 accounts of Jesus' life, which is way more than most of the disciples. Mary was with Jesus on his journeys. She was there as he hung on the cross, and according to all 4 Gospels, was either alone or with a small group of people who came to the tomb on Easter morning. She was one of the few still looking at the jar on the shelf, and when she got to the tomb, it was empty. An empty tomb to her meant, oh God, you have got to be kidding me. It's even worse than I thought. A tomb with a body meant, oh yes, this is terrible. But an empty tomb, before you know what happens on Easter, is just, you got to be kidding me. They killed him and they stole his body. Mary goes and tells Peter and John. And John comes and stops at the entrance to the tomb. He sees the strips of linen that have been covering Jesus' body and thinks, oh no, he doesn't go in. But Peter walks in and he looks around, and then Peter and John go back home. But not Mary. Mary stayed. She stayed and she cried. She cried and she stayed. It's then that Mary senses someone is behind her. John tells us it's Jesus, but she didn't realize it was Jesus. He looks so different, or her vision is so clouded by tears, she can't see what has happened. And she says, "Sir, if you've carried the body away, tell me where you've put him and I will go get him." This supposed gardener says to her, "Mary." And there might be a lot of crazy stuff going on, but she does not mistake the sound of her name coming from his voice. She's heard it too many times. She knows Jesus is not dead anymore. He's alive. Jesus announces resurrection, universe-shaking, world-changing resurrection, by saying the name of his friend. Jesus announces that through him, God has done all that is necessary for us to be reconciled to God through the cross, through the grave, and he announces it by saying the name of his friend. He knows her name. I love that Jesus announces resurrection with Mary. Jesus shares the miracle that will be the miracle that we all need with a name. And that's how I got to wake up my Mary on a spring day in 2006. She was taking her nap when I sat down on the couch to watch whatever was on TV. That's what you had to do in 2006. You watched whatever was on TV at the moment. I looked up, and up above the TV on a shelf was Petey, flapping his brand new, beautiful wings. I went and woke up Mary. You know how, Mary. And I pulled her out in her little shirt and Elmo branded diaper. And with Rachel, we soaked in the miracle of a butterfly who we thought was a dead caterpillar. Look, I didn't totally think through putting that caterpillar in the jar. If I had, I probably would have decided against it. Too much risk. And as followers of Jesus, there will always be things we don't totally think through. And joining Jesus is like that. Like, you think Peter weighed everything out when he joined Jesus? It says he dropped his nets and followed him. You think Mary had it all figured out? It says she went wherever he went. She stood at the base of the cross while he died, and she got up before sunrise on the third day to go to the tomb. That's how Easter starts for all of us. Today, perhaps you're grieving the loss of someone you love. You have cancer. Your marriage is toast. Don't give up. Don't stop looking for the miracle. How could Jesus do that for me? I don't know exactly, but I know he makes worms turn into butterflies and glass jars for little girls and skeptical dads. I know he had the power to sit up in his grave and carefully take his bandages off, neatly fold them in a pile on the floor, and then bust through a cave door. And that God who has that power, the power to conquer sin and death, that God does not have to just be someone in a picture for you. That God knows your stinking name. Christ is risen. Christ is risen indeed.